Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the Green Goddess Healing Podcast. So, this is our first podcast ever that we're doing together. So, the general intention for this podcast is to bring collective healing through the lens of the Green Goddess. What does the Green Goddess mean according to you?
That is quite a broad question. The Green Goddess to me encompasses everything that we see that comes from nature, and that includes us as well as a component of her. So, yeah, thinking about that for me, it's everything that comes from her. She's very versatile, she's very giving, but she's also capable of taking those things away. So, getting into our topic, I guess, today of death and rebirth, that is something that you see very commonly with the Green Goddess herself being able to be fertile and giving life and birth, but also destruction through things like natural disasters and just overall death and rebirth.
So that's going to be the general energetic container for this podcast. As my lovely co host Riley mentioned, that the theme for tonight is going to be the cycles of death and rebirth, but as a general oversight, it is going to be the Green Goddess, the mother who gives everything but can take everything away in a snap. And as we mentioned, it is our first episode, so bear with us. We are going to improve and get better as we go along. So for tonight, the theme is going to be the cycles of death and rebirth. We are going to talk about Taurus energy because we're in Taurus season, and are also going to talk about the feminine polarity. So without further ado, I'm going to light this candle so we can create a safe and sacred space for our session this evening. All right. Take her away, sister. Did you have anything else you'd like to share or
Well, again, as our first podcast, I'd like to welcome all of our viewers, the gods and goddesses who would like to support the Green Goddess as well, or who have heard her call. As one of your hosts tonight, my name is Riley, and my lovely sister here is our other host, and her name is Leah. I will let her introduce herself a little bit before we get into things.
Hello, everyone. As my sister mentioned, my name is Leah. I've been exploring the metaphysical for a good number of years now. It is something that I am deeply passionate about and driven by. And the concept of the Green Goddess healing is something that has been in Riley and I's cauldron for quite some time. It is a huge vision that we are going to be birthing together, starting with this podcast, because we do have similar interests, and we hope that we're able to provide support, help, and insight through this podcast. Would you like to share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, well, I guess just touching on that same thing that I've been on this journey for quite a while. And for me, kind of also diving into today's topic, shadow work and the cycles of death and rebirth have been quite important in my journey and in my learning. And being able to kind of cushion myself or lean on the Green Goddess, knowing that she has all of those facets, has made the journey a little easier for me. And so I'm hoping that being able to share a little bit of this knowledge, this insight with you guys, that it helps you guys to get along on that path and maybe feel that connection with the Green Goddess, Mother Earth, a little bit more.
Well said. I love that. So, as we said, the theme for tonight is the cycles of death and rebirth. And I guess, Riley, if I were to ask you, what kind of sentiment does that invoke within you? Because sometimes people can feel a little hesitant when we hear the word death, and even rebirth can feel daunting. So, what are kind of your insights in regards to that?
Yeah, well, I think, like you said, it can be a daunting question. It is a deep question. But as someone who has experienced death in this life, it is, something that you get more used to as it happens. And of course, we all know physical death, losing someone, losing a pet, a family member, someone you love, but we don't always understand a ego death or a personal death or something that happens within. And I think that that's just as valuable to think about when you're looking into death and rebirth and these things like that. And as difficult as it is, sometimes looking inwards, it's sometimes that death that is the most important. It's not all these exterior deaths or the material deaths that we see. Those are, unfortunately, fortunately, just part of the matrix. But to me, I guess, yeah, the real death that is important is the death that happens within and allows the transformation, that allows the rebirth, that allows you to become the better version of you. And in a way, I guess the way I see it too is you're not always just losing parts of you. Death is scary, but again, I like to relate things to nature. And so if you look at a tree, for example, it can have many dead limbs, but a lot of them are still alive. And so just because you allow parts of yourself to kind of die off or to not be as important anymore doesn't mean that you're less strong, you're not as hardy or anything like that. So I'd say that that's a small summary of what death is for me. What about you? What would you say is the first thing that comes to you about death?
Well, I really like get the light. Soul. Difficult. That I felt that in my soul when you said that about like the different aspects of life just being in. But then like the learning and the rebirth you experienced afterwards.
Yeah. So for me, my initial point was receiving an injury when I was 12 years old, playing soccer. I got a slip disc and it was quite severe. I was in pain for several years and I still am struggling with that pain today. And I guess what died for me at that point was a normal childhood. With the pain I was experiencing, I wasn't able to do a lot of the things that regular kids my age were doing. Even growing up past that, certain tasks, certain activities I couldn't do. And even that really changed a lot of things, like I couldn't be the same person that I was before that incident. There was no going back. There was a death, even though I was still alive, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, so for me, that was the first instance where I truly felt a huge shift and a huge death in my life because yeah, I was like, okay, at 12 years old, I'm done being a kid. I have to care for my back. I can't overexert myself. Maybe I can't go jump on trampolines or I can't do backflips or all these things that other kids are having fun doing. For me, that was the initial point. And if you're asking about like the rebirth and what's on the other side of that, well, for me, that was the first traumatic incident, the first death that started awakening me to my spiritual path.
That's
So,
deep.
in that inability to do what other kids were doing, I had a lot more time to sit and think and reflect on things. And through that reflection came awareness, came the ability to think and to really expand in terms of seeing with an intuitive eye at that stage. So, yes, in a way, my physical capabilities were limited at that point, but I found, I guess, my spiritual capabilities were just starting to open up. And that was, I guess, yeah, the rebirth aspect of that. So
I love that. Not the trauma part, but the rebirth part is very powerful. I feel like like your soulful kind of self was being reborn and kind of awakened at that point.
pretty hard for at a young age, but it is something that has taught me quite a bit, even at this age. So yeah, deaths can be difficult, but with an aware mind and an aware eye, you can be grateful and thankful for those things because they truly do help you grow and become a better person. So
I love that. Yeah, and I love the way you're saying that because it's not negating the pain or the experience, it's acknowledging fully well the loss that you experience, at the same time honoring the gift that came from it, if we want to put it in that way. So it's like we're honoring both those aspects, the death and the rebirth in this experience.
yeah, well, it's a big thing to go through, and I'm sure many of you can relate to an experience in your life, first death maybe in your life, where you felt shifted or changed, or you woke up one day and you were like, I don't see the same way that I did, or something so big has shifted that nothing can be the same again, And I'm sure you have experienced that, so I'm not sure if there's anything you'd like to share in that sense.
Well, for me, the experience that comes to mind was probably my head injury. I'd say after that period, I realized after getting a concussion through playing soccer that a big part of my personality was being a soccer player. And the realization after that head trauma that I wouldn't be able to play, I experienced for the first time that death of identity.
That's
And
big.
yeah, so like the questions of like who am I if I can't play soccer anymore? I realized at that point that I had kind of really built my sense of self around that because it had been such a huge part of my life, playing competitive, playing multiple times a week. That was the only outlet where I felt my identity was truly having the opportunity, I'd say, to like shine and be exhibited. And losing that in a snap, and then the uncertainty, the physical and emotional pain that followed, it was really challenging, and the amount of years that it lasted as well. But at the same time, very similar to what you shared, it allowed me to take a step back and be like, okay, I'm losing this identity. It really wasn't who I am, so can we start to be curious and ask more questions, being like, okay, well, being a soccer player is something I do externally. What if I were to look internally and figure out who I truly am and anchor into aspects of myself that are enduring, that couldn't be taken away through illness or disease or injury? So it kind of really set me on this path. And even though I'm really big into archetypes today, I did start to dive in a little bit then. So doing like the personality quizzes, the sage, the witch, the healer. And it's really at that point in time that I started dive into energies and realizing that energy never dies. it can be shifted, it can be transmuted. And I realized at that point that I could start to rebirth my sense of self within these energies, because they would always be with me. They might shift, they might ebb and flow, but that's kind of where I started to rebuild my sense of identity and myself, essentially, and kind of come out of that dark hole.
Yeah, well, I like that how you said that. A death of your identity, of who you thought you kind of were at that point. And I feel like many people can relate to that. They do put their identity on something that they do, like their profession. Like people attach their identity to being a dentist or to being a teacher or something like that. And if you get sick or if you lose the ability to do that profession, a lot of people, and myself included, could probably kind of have a hard time dealing with that, because you have kind of put your whole life around this one thing, and then something happens in your life and it's just like, I can't do that thing anymore. So what do you do at that point? And that is why it's traumatic, for a lot of us, losing that identity, losing that sense of self, and having to try and figure out, who am I again? And that gets harder the older you get too, if you've stuck to an identity for 60, 70 years and all of a sudden that gets taken away. Yeah, a lot of people lose it. So which makes sense. It's so traumatic. Just a little side note, it's kind of like in the Matrix when they say they don't unplug older people because it's just too hard for them to make out what's real, what's not. And it's the same thing with these kind of deaths, right? These ego deaths that happen. Maybe some of us get to an age where it's too hard for us to kind of process all of the changes, the big energetic shifts. Again, now that I'm at this certain age, how do I reshape my whole life? How do I restart my whole life? And a lot of people can find that stressful or maybe even depressing. But I don't know if you'll agree, but at that point, you're kind of set free. Yeah, you might be at a more mature age, but now you can recreate yourself. And I think like everybody wants that, or at least wants a chance to be able to really see who they could be outside of who they thought they were, putting in that actual energy when you have nothing holding you down anymore, or that thing that you thought you were tethered to no longer exists. Before it was kind of more of a limited mindset, but after that death, you can be anyone. So it's that unlimitedness, which might also scare people. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, that's what I was gonna say. Like, I definitely sense there'd be some people on board to be like, yeah, my life just went for a huge freaking you know what. And they're just excited to rebuild. Whereas other people think maybe older professions, like the doctors, the lawyers, people that have really been anchored in specific communities, if that gets taken away because maybe they were a surgeon and they lose a limb for some reason, the terror that comes with that. And I think that again ties in the death archetype. The imagery I get is the tarot card of death. People are always terrified on TV shows when that card comes out. But yes, as we're talking about tonight, we're trying to elucidate that it doesn't need to be that daunting. And no, it doesn't. Most of the time, it does not mean a physical death. But a death needs to take place, and that we have this guardian of death present to facilitate that for us.
Yeah. And I feel like looking into the tarot as well, like the guardian of death is there to take you through an unseen portal, right? And it's the loss of also the known for the unknown, which is obviously what scares a lot of people, is that, yes, this part of my life maybe isn't working anymore, or this part of my life has expired, but I'm used to it. It's comforting, and at least I know what I'm waking up to every day. But if I step through that gate of death, who knows what's on the other side? It's good. I'm telling you, it's good. But we always have that fear of the unknown, of not knowing what's there. And that's why I think speaking about the rebirth part is also very important to these aspects. And so like you were saying, you went inward to find who you were in the parts of you that can't be destroyed by outer society or outer circumstances. And so like, what did you find? Like, what was the rebirth by going inward?
Well, for me, the rebirth that took place was certain archetypes that are going to stay with me because they're energetically imprinted within my being and emanate from my soul. And I think that's the beauty that comes from the death and rebirth, is that eventually you can get to a point where you're operating from your soul, and your soul is the constant. It's not your human self, it's not your ego, it's not what you can do, it's your soul. And once you can anchor into that, that stays the same. You could be battling an illness, you can be going through an injury, and then you just come back to your soulful self and you realize, okay, I'm still this thing. I'm still this energy, I'm still this archetype or what have you. And like you just know it because it feels like a coming home. I'd say. So for me, like personally, like I remember journeying once during a sound healing ceremony with a mentor of mine, and it was to kind of help me come home to my sense of self. And the imagery I got was a shooting star.
Wow. Very powerful.
Yeah, so something that just kind of illuminates the night sky, and it's a reminder that that's what my soul is. So it's nothing that can ever be taken away from me, even though my human self might have human days where I feel pressed and just kind of let down by the state of affairs. My soul endures, and that's who I know I am at that level.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that that's unfortunately what trauma tries to teach us, what death tries to teach us, is that those things are uncomfortable. Yes, you're losing parts of yourself that you might never see again, but they're peeling back to show you who you are at your core. I think again of like a shooting star kind of burning out all those exterior layers to get to that interior core, which is who you are. It's your solid inner that can't change. So I think it's a beautiful vision.
Thank you. I think so too. But yeah, I liked what you mentioned about the portal. So I think we do want to transition to the rebirth part of tonight's episode, but I think it's important to highlight that there's death. And as that's kind of occurring, we do enter into this portal, this void, this unknown. And it's highlighting for our viewers and listeners that if they are experiencing that unknown energy, that they are in the void and that there is a rebirth, that there is hope, and that there's light.
I do like that you mentioned that the in between,
Yes,
the limbo. Yeah, we've all been there, most of us. And for those that haven't, I do wish it on you because, like my sister said, what's on the other side is great. But touching on the in between part, it is very uncomfortable. It is frustrating. You don't know what's really going on. You don't know for sure if things are going to get better. There's no one telling you like 100% you're going to be good, you're going to be clear. And it's daunting because you're kind of just like, do I step back into the old life that no longer supports me? Or do I keep moving forward into something I don't know, I don't see, and it might kill me? Who knows? So it's moving between those layers, but like once you get to the other side of that uncomfortable period, which fortunately, I don't know, but I'm sure you can agree, can have almost an indefinite amount of time. It's not, I choose the death, I'm in limbo for 2 days, and then I'm in the rebirth phase.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that, unfortunately. Sometimes we're lost in the limbo a little bit longer, takes us longer to find ourselves. Maybe we're more resistant to the change, to the death that occurred, and we just have a difficulty moving to the other side, even if it is what's best for us.
Yeah, I like that you said that, because sometimes when it comes to the void energy, we might not always realize that it's taking place on multiple levels. I like that you touch on the timeline. You can't just be like, I'm going to be in limbo for 2 days and then I'm going to be rebirth. I'm going to be brand new. And again, it's like our ego self and conditioning that's like, well, I want this quickly. I want to be reborn yesterday.
I want it now.
Yeah, well, basically, and it's understanding that there is no time limit to how long it can take. It can be a week, it can be months, it can be years, it can be decades for certain people, and it's realizing that that is okay. You can't put a time limit on your cycle because it is your cycle.
And I guess to that point, not to scare anyone, but can also take lifetimes. But the nice thing is that The quicker you move through these cycles, the quicker you learn to just let go and let the death occur, the quicker the cycles occur. So instead of lifetimes, it becomes decades. Instead of decades, it becomes several years. Instead of several years, it becomes a couple of months, days, whatever. But that's what these cycles of death are here to teach you, that eventually, little by little, it'll get better and it'll get to a point where these deaths don't even bother you anymore. Or losing of that certain aspect. You're just like, you know what, get out. I don't even need you, and I'm happy to lose you.
Yeah, I like that. I like that you're highlighting that it can accelerate. As much as we're mentioning that it can take lifetimes in certain circumstances, like if you are dedicated to doing the inner work, the purging, the clearing, the deathing, the releasing, it can happen a lot quicker. And I'd say like that's one of the beautiful parts of this cycle, is that it can accelerate. And then we can touch on quantum leaping and stuff like that, which we're not going to get into tonight, but that's kind of where that is born from, is being able to move through that death and rebirth cycle so quickly.
Yeah, for me to touch back on trees and nature, which I love. Trees get to a point where they don't, like I said, they don't mind losing the branches. It's just part of life. They have no qualms. They couldn't be bothered. If you're like, oh, I wonder if that tree feels bad, it's losing that limb. No, the tree knows it's for its greater good. It really doesn't care at the end of the day. It's going to use up the resources that that dead limb was going to use and use it for something completely different, which is what we do when we experience those deaths as well. I think we are the Green Goddess, and so relating death and rebirth to the natural world also helps us relate and reconnect to that aspect of ourselves. We are part of nature, and so we shouldn't fear these things that happen naturally all the time. Like, it's part of life. If you live in North America like we do, you experience the seasons. Winter happens, death is just a part of those seasons. And if you look at spring, then you see everything coming back in a very flourished fashion. So nothing lost, just made better.
Yeah, I like that for sure. And talking about spring, when it comes to the astrological wheel, we have Aries that kickstart that cycle for us that are into astrology. But we are currently in Taurus season. So I don't know if you wanted to kind of share your insights or what comes up for you when we talk about this shift from Aries into Taurus and what those energies mean to you.
Yeah, well, if I look into those energies and how they shift in terms of like death and rebirth as well, Aries being the kickstart of the cycle of the zodiac year and of spring, you see that life, you see that rebirth coming in a little bit. And it is in a very fiery sign. So it starts off very slow, but then it kind of comes in quite punchy towards the end with a lot of energy. The death part that you would see with Aries and April is after all the snow has gone, a lot of things are still dead. The grass hasn't fully grown back. You get to see maybe things that have kind of decayed over winter. You do kind of see a lot of that part of life in the springtime. It's dirty, it's brown, it's kind of just spring. Yeah. There's worms and it smells like spring. It smells like that decay. It smells like death, literally.
Yeah.
I'd say in spring. And then coming to this season, now that the rains have passed a little bit, the decay has kind of been washed away. It has been broken down back into the earth. And now we're seeing a bit more of that rebirth now in Taurus season. We have more things growing through, more green, more flowers, and it happens after more of that death in the Aries and then more of the rebirth that you're seeing in the Taurus season, which is a very nice way to kickstart the zodiac year.
Yeah, I like that. Well, I feel like you were touching on fertility. And Taurus rules the second house, which is finances, money, values, fertility. And so talking about like the plants starting to bloom and kind of stabilize during the month of May is a beautiful image that you're giving us to enjoy and savor right now.
Yeah. Get out there. If you don't know what I'm talking about, get out there and look at it. Okay. It's all out there. see all the little flowers, the bees. That's the rebirth. So if we can think again in terms of nature and how to connect back with that, after we have winter, we have a couple of months of rain where we see all the decay, all the stuff that kind of didn't make it. And then in Taurus season and kind of a bit further into spring, you see, yeah, that full rebirth where that death is being reused and transformed into nutrients, into stuff that can support new life. To relate back to the Green Goddess in terms of death and rebirth, this is one of the beautiful powers that she has. For a lot of people, we think that, again, death is just finite, that that's the end, there's nothing on the other side. But she reminds us that death is actually a beautiful sacrifice that usually lends to a richer future. So again, when you're seeing all these things molding in the ground or becoming part of the earth, they're dead, but they're helping the new generation be even stronger than they were. And that's also, in a weird way, how spirituality works. Some of us, through our ego deaths, through the things that we experience, we become better, but we also help the next generations become better. We help others grow stronger because of the sacrifices that we've had to make, the deaths that we've experienced.
That was so powerful. Oh my God, I have chills listening to that. I love how you said that because, yeah, like that definitely symbolizes like Taurus energy, ideal version in the sense that it's building a foundation upon which others can grow.
Yeah,
and learn from.
Yeah, and again, the Green Goddess, that's what she does. She gives us all that foundation to kind of grow and become stronger and the better versions of ourselves. But she does demand death for that rebirth to happen. The balance you got to give to get.
I like that. Yeah.
I think it's a fair trade.
Yeah, I think so too. Did you want to talk about maybe like the shadow side of Taurus? Like we talked about like the beautiful part, fertility, creating that foundation for other beings to kind of maybe leap forward in their lives. But what about kind of maybe the darker side of Taurus energy?
Yeah, well, I guess in that sense, if you look at Taurus also being a feminine polarity, just what's coming through for me is that it would be the negative aspect of not being able to create. So,
Ooh, okay.
you know how if we're looking again at the feminine polarity is usually the creatrix. She's the fertile one. She's the one that puts out all of these things. And so I could see the shadow as being maybe envy or anger towards not being able to do those things. You're someone who can't have children or who can't procreate. And so maybe this time of year brings out maybe a more shadow aspect of being unhappy with the production and the fertility of the world around you. Or maybe you're not capable of producing. Obviously, children comes first, but it's not the only thing that we produce. It could be finances, it could be growing your own food, it could be a relationship, these things that you want in your life but that aren't providing fruitful kind of changes. So to me, that I guess would be, yeah, the shadow aspect is all the aspects of your life that aren't seeing that kind of blooming, that kind of rebirth. And so if you see the rebirth on one side, but it's not happening in yours, then it's just the shadow can come out and kind of lash out and feel upset, angry, or resentful towards the growth that is occurring for others.
I definitely resonate with that.
Anything you'd want to add to that?
I think for me, in terms of like shadow side of Taurus, like what comes to mind is the stubbornness, So I think when we think of bulls, when they really don't want to do something, they like hanker down in their hooves and they're not budging.
Yeah.
And I think very much to what it is you were saying about kind of maybe that resentment or that jealousy, if we tie it back to the feminine, and that inability to maybe procreate or have children, and how we can become so stubborn and just kind of set in our ways, believing that we've failed as a woman, being the embodiment of the feminine, and how we can just stay stuck and refuse to grow or to change. And I would really say that that's kind of the shadow side of Taurus for me, that stuck, stubborn energy and that refusing to get your head out the soil and actually look at where stuff is actually blooming for you.
Yeah. And I guess this is where we would talk I refer back to the limbo stage, right? These are people in their stubbornness are kind of refusing to move forward and see the light that they do have in their life. Again, since Taurus is the polarity of the feminine, we are touching a lot on feminine feelings in terms of fertility and things like that. And again, as a woman, we are taught at a very young age that as a woman, our only means of creating is procreation. And again, when we face that barrier, whether you have PCOS, whether you have other hormonal issues, whether it's a dysfunction physically or anything that prevents you from having those children, like my sister said, you almost feel possibly a loss of identity that you aren't a woman or that you aren't capable of forming or being in the energy of a woman because you can't do these things. What we're trying to also say is that in the rebirth phase, it's looking at all the other things that you can create that aren't a child or a physical being. As women, we've been conditioned for so long that that's the only thing that we can really provide. But when that ability is taken away through any kind of means, really opens you up to either who the hell am I? What the heck is going on? Or who am I now if I'm not going to be that thing? If I'm not going to be a mom, who else can I be? What else can I be? And it's understanding that, yes, we all do. Most of us have a maternal instinct, and it's understanding that that instinct can be put into different areas of your life. It doesn't necessarily have to be towards children. And if it is, then it can be towards nephews, nieces, or even other means of supporting children through teaching or other things. But as women, we are versatile. And I'm pulling back to what I think of the Green Goddess, she does everything. She creates trees, she creates rocks, she creates the weather, she created the oceans. Versatile, very adaptable, and no feminine energy should ever feel stuck in a box or feel like they don't deserve the rebirth that comes after the death they are experiencing.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. And that, like, we can't limit or shouldn't limit our feminine energy just because we've been conditioned to limit it, as you say, to just procreation. Because some of us want to have children but can't, but then there are some of us that don't even want children. And how women that don't want children are labeled negatively too. Again, being put in that same box of, well, you don't want kids, you don't have value as a woman. And just really the healing comes into, as you say, reconnecting back to the original mother, which is Mother Nature, Gaia herself. As you're saying, she's versatile. She creates, she destroys, she nurtures, she removes. And it's realizing that as women, we all have that energy, that archetype that lives within us because we come from her.
We're hoping that this helps some of you guys reconnect with that energy. The feminine is a beautiful energy, the masculine is a beautiful energy, and we both need to kind of embrace it and understand that it is very versatile, adaptable, and we are shapeshifters. We can do whatever we want and we shouldn't be limited. But anyways, I think we will move on to our final aspect. So we would like to pull a card that is attached to the polarity of the month. So since we're in Taurus, we're going to pull a feminine polarity card and see how that card kind of relates to today's topic in terms of the cycles of death and rebirth. So I'm going to let Leah go ahead and shuffle the cards. We're going to see what comes out today. The deck that we are using is by Colette Fairreed. I'm not sure if you can see that, but it is the Goddess Power Oracle. And so we're going to pull out one card and see. And I think that this card is very, very synchronistic. So the card that was pulled is Shakti, and the word that goes with it is transformation. Seeing what that is heard there. So yes, I think very, very synchronistic for today. We're gonna put her down there for now. And yeah, I'll let you take it away, see what you think would relate to today's conversation.
Well, it's very fitting, as you say, and even the numerology on this card, we have the number 46, which makes it 10, and 10 symbolizes completion. So I think it's through transformation we achieve a sense of wholeness and completion within ourselves. And that's really the gift. I know the quality of this video isn't the greatest, but we can see a woman here touching her third eye, which is that point between your eyebrows. And we just see rays of light pouring down upon her head. And this is just really symbolizing that we've transformed from the inside out and we're just really being illuminated from higher energies and spirits. So, tying into today's talk, this card is very, very fitting. And I love that Shakti is known as that energy that dwells in the womb. So talking
feminine energy.
Exactly. So talking about that feminine energy, and we have Shakti here where she's found in the womb, and we're talking about having kids or not having kids, and it's realizing that this energy, this goddess lives there regardless of how you feel towards children, creation. She's there and we can all tap into her.
Yeah. So to touch on that, anyone who's listening and who might be feeling like they're in the shadow aspect of Taurus, as we mentioned, maybe resentful, a bit of angerness, maybe some bitterness, Shakti is coming forward as a champion to show you that no, you have so much more to offer than just that your womb remains your womb. Even if you don't have a womb, if it's again been removed, that energy center still remains. And Shakti resides there, and it's important to reconnect with that center, to allow yourself to feel the creative energy that resides there and understand that you can do whatever you put your mind to with that energy. And this goddess is here to remind you and to support you in that. There is beauty on the other side. You have so many talents, you have so many things that you can do in this world. So follow her and listen. You can do it. The light and the rebirth is on the other side, and it's worth it. The transformation, it's ugly, but it's necessary. And it's always better on the other side.
I would agree with that. And I would just highlight that even though we have been talking about the feminine this evening, because we are, as my sister mentioned, in the season of Taurus, which has a feminine polarity, this goes regardless of gender. We all have feminine energy. We did touch upon women as being the physical embodiment of the feminine, but this applies to you regardless of how you identify in terms of gender.
And even, yeah, like my sister saying, if you're more masculine, but you feel like you can connect to this energy, that's completely normal. As individuals, we have both energies within us. And so it is normal for both genders or all genders to feel either a masculine energetic pull or a feminine energetic pull. And that can relate in terms of, fertility, maybe not being able to produce as much as you want, especially in Taurus season. Financials are important, the material is important. And so, yes, that can definitely come up in terms of shadow, in terms of plants where you're not feeling like you're as fertile as you would like to be.
I would agree with that. And as you were speaking, the image I got was that of the tower in the tarot, where we think it is also terrifying. It's this tower that's collapsing, but again, it's to allow transformation. So if your life terrifies you right now, you are undergoing a transformation. And yes, it will get better on the other side, but you need to just grin and bear it and move through the changes as best as you can.
Yeah. Another little story for me is butterflies. They go through this kind of transformation all the time. And I know it's very cliche, but a caterpillar, I don't know if you've seen them, they can be quite large. And those guys are going right into the transformation. They are fully releasing, they are allowing it to happen. They allow their bodies to fully liquefy. Like, talk about a
Yeah.
death. Like, you are literally allowing your full vessel and you're saying, I don't need you anymore. And we think the things we go through are painful. Like, I don't think that that's very pleasant. And that takes a while. They go down to goo, they're covered in a chrysalis. It takes time. And then they emerge. And you might think, okay, well, they've emerged. That's the rebirth. They're fine. They're dandy. But even at that point, once they've emerged, most of the time they can't just fly away. They have to let their wings dry, they have to let them fully expand. So even once you get to the other side, sometimes it feels like nothing's changed. It's gone through the caterpillar, it's gone through being goo, and now it's on the other side where it's still kind of just earthbound. But it takes those few moments of trusting, of knowing that the transformation kind of did what it's supposed to, and then the butterfly is able to take off. I think for me, again, relating to nature, the green goddess, like she shows us that these things are so natural. As terrifying and weird as it may be, like I don't think any of us would want to turn into goo and be covered in some kind of weird shell just to come out with wings. If you do, let us know. So we are kind of lucky in the way that we experience our deaths, the way that we experience our transformations. We don't have to physically fully change all the time. Whereas for a lot of nature's creatures, it is a full change and it is a full commitment to that change. It's no longer being a terrestrial being, it's being aerial being now, which is, we literally walk on our 2 feet every day, but imagine going through that. Imagine losing your whole body and then a couple of days later actually being able to fly. Like, I think a lot of us would just be like, nah, not here. Not on this earth. But yeah, I think it's a beautiful, beautiful analogy, a beautiful connection with this card, connecting the green goddess to other goddesses and showing that transformation and death, rebirth, it's part of the cycles that we all go through.
Yeah, and I think for me, in terms of closing remark, based on the lovely visual you gave for us this evening, would be that period of patience that comes after the death, the void, and having our wings, so to speak. I love that you highlighted that butterflies, they don't fly right away. They need to adjust to their wings. And I think it's important to highlight that for our viewers, that patience is required for this kind of journey, and that patience is very much a trait associated with Taurus.
Yeah, well, it is in relations to stubbornness, right? Patience and being stubborn, they kind of oppose each other, but also hold each other's hands in a weird way.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Exactly. Yeah.
They're both holding a firm position. Stubbornness is more a negative, whereas patience is more of a positive, allowing position, which is what we need to be in when we are accepting death as a cycle in our life. Any last words that you'd like to share with our viewers?
No, I think I'm good for this evening. I think we touched on everything beautifully.
Well, if you guys have any questions or anything you'd like us to elaborate more, obviously please let us know in comments. But other than that, thank you for joining us for our first podcast.
And we hope you listen again soon.
Thank you, gods and goddesses, and have a wonderful day or night.
Bye.